took a bullet to save his handler. What this canine German Shepherd did next left the entire unit in tears. The winter night settled heavy over the outskirts of Houston, the sky thick with low clouds and the air sharp with cold. Frost clung to the windshields of parked vehicles lining the dimly lit street. Inside an unmarked van, the tactical unit of the Houston Police Department ran through final checks. Their target, a suspected drug distribution house at the end of the block, a single-story building with blacked-out windows and a reinforced door. Weeks of surveillance had led to this moment. Among the team stood Officer Mark Davis, a seasoned veteran with over 15 years on the force, his demeanor calm and focused. Beside him sat Axel, his canine partner, a powerful German Shepherd with a coat of deep black and rust. Axel had been trained for missions like this, alert, responsive, silent until called upon. He glanced up at Mark, sensing the tension in the air, then turned his eyes back to the door. At the signal, the team exited the van and moved swiftly into position, their boots whispering over the pavement. Mark held Axel's leash tight as they approached the house, waiting behind the breacher. With a loud crash, the door flew open and the team flooded in with precise, rehearsed movements, their voices sharp and commanding. The first 2 rooms were cleared within seconds, but as they entered the narrow hallway leading to the back, something changed. A flicker of movement. Too fast, too close. A figure emerged from the shadows, armed, yelling something unintelligible. Then, a flash. A shot rang out, splitting the silence. Mark saw the glint of the weapon too late. Axel, in that split second, lunged. The bullet struck him square in the side as he launched into the air, his body twisting mid-flight. He collided with the suspect just as a second shot fired, knocking the gun free. The team subdued the man instantly, but all eyes turned to the ground. Axel lay on the concrete, unmoving, blood pooling beneath him. The moment froze. "No! No! Axel!" Mark's voice cracked as he dropped to his knees. His hands shook as he pressed against the wound, trying to stop the bleeding. "Stay with me, boy. Do not you dare leave me." His voice broke completely. "You saved my life." Axel's chest heaved once, a shallow, ragged breath, then another. Mark cradled his head, brushing away blood and fur from his eyes. The rest of the team stood around them, stunned. These were hardened officers, trained, tested, accustomed to chaos. But none of them had ever seen Mark like this, not during shootouts, not during losses, never like this. Mark was crying. His tears fell freely as he shouted for medics, as he held Axel close, rocking slightly on the cold floor. The radio buzzed with urgent calls for emergency transport. The suspect was cuffed and forgotten in the corner as the unit focused only on the dog, who had just taken a bullet for his handler. Axel's body was still, save for the faint rise and fall of his ribs. The team watched, silent and helpless, as the ambulance arrived. They helped lift Axel carefully, placing him on a stretcher usually reserved for human officers. No one questioned it. No one said a word. They had all seen bravery before, but this was something else. Long before he wore a vest marked Canine Unit, Axel had known abandonment. He had once belonged to someone, no one knew who, but by the time animal control found him, he was wandering the outskirts of an abandoned warehouse, ribs showing through his mangy coat, limping from an old injury. He flinched at every human voice and retreated from every outstretched hand. At the shelter, he was labeled unadoptable. No one wanted a large, nervous German Shepherd with scars and aggression noted on his file. Days turned into weeks. The shelter was crowded, and Axel's time was running out. But then came Mark Davis. Mark had always believed that some of the best canine partners came from the toughest beginnings. He made frequent visits to shelters, looking for dogs with fire in their eyes, not fear. When he saw Axel, huddled in the corner of his kennel, silent and still, something clicked. There was no bark, no wag of the tail, only a steady, wary gaze that met Mark's. And didn't look away. That look was enough. Mark signed the papers and brought Axel home. The beginning was rough. Axel did not trust easily. He growled when touched, refused to eat, and sat by the door for hours, staring, as if waiting for someone who would never return. Mark did not push. He gave Axel space, routine, and quiet companionship. Every day they trained. Slowly, consistently. Commands were introduced. Hand signals followed. Positive reinforcement, patience, and countless hours in the yard became their rhythm. Little by little, Axel began to respond. He stopped flinching. He started watching Mark, following his lead. The turning point came 6 months in, during a mock exercise with other officers. Axel performed every command with precision. He tracked, sniffed, sat, stayed, and when the drill ended, he did something he had never done before. He walked up to Mark and pressed his head against his leg. It was the first physical gesture of trust. Mark never forgot it. They were assigned together full-time after that, Mark and Axel, the inseparable duo. In the unit they became known for their efficiency, their bond, and how they moved like extensions of each other. Axel didn't just follow orders, he anticipated them. They shared a language built on subtle gestures and mutual respect. Then came the night of the shooting. After taking the bullet meant for Mark, Axel was rushed to the emergency veterinary hospital under police escort. He had lost a lot of blood. The bullet had torn through muscle and nicked a rib. The surgical team worked for hours fighting to stabilize him. Mark waited in the hallway, pacing in silence, fists clenched, eyes red. The team tried to reassure him, but he heard nothing. Finally, just before dawn, the door opened. A tired-looking veterinarian stepped out, removing her gloves slowly. Mark stood frozen. "He made it," she said softly, a small, exhausted smile forming on her face. Mark exhaled a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. He nodded, unable to speak, as emotion swelled in his chest. Axel had survived. The dog who once had no one, who had been given up on by the world, had fought through once again. This time, not just for himself, but for the man who had never given up on him. The weeks that followed were the hardest either of them had ever faced. Axel survived the bullet, but the road ahead was steep and uncertain. The surgery had saved his life, but the damage to muscle and tissue in his shoulder was severe. When he was finally cleared to begin physical rehabilitation, the veterinarians warned Mark. Axel might never walk the same way again. He might never return to duty. But Mark did not care about that. He only cared that Axel would live, and live well. At the rehab center, progress came in inches, not miles. Axel's first attempts to stand were pitiful. His legs trembled beneath him, and he collapsed onto the padded floor. He whimpered, frustrated and exhausted. But every time he fell, Mark was there. He knelt beside him, whispering words only Axel seemed to understand. "If you do not quit," Mark would say softly, stroking his fur, "then neither will I." Every morning they trained. Short walks down a quiet hallway, gentle stretches, hydrotherapy, laser treatments, ice packs and heat pads. Axel limped, stumbled, groaned, but he never stopped trying. The therapists were amazed by his spirit, but even more by the presence of Mark, who never missed a session. When Axel fell, Mark picked him up. When he bled, Mark cleaned it with steady hands. When Axel snarled in pain, Mark held his gaze and reminded him, again and again, "You saved me, now let me save you." There were setbacks. One morning after a particularly rough session, Axel refused to move. He lay on the floor, eyes dim, breathing heavy. Mark sat down beside him and stayed there for hours, not speaking, just waiting. At dusk, Axel finally shifted, placed one paw forward, and dragged himself up again. 3 months passed. On a quiet Tuesday morning, Mark opened the passenger door of his patrol car. He did not call Axel. He just waited. From the front steps of the house, Axel limped forward. His walk was uneven but steady. Slowly he approached the open door, paused for a breath, and then climbed in with effort. He curled into the familiar space on the passenger side and looked at Mark with calm, unwavering eyes. Mark's throat tightened. "Welcome back, partner." They returned to the station that afternoon, not for duty, but just to visit. Word had spread through the department that Axel was coming. When Mark entered the main hallway, Axel at his side, conversations stopped. The usual buzz of radio static, typing, and casual chatter faded into silence. Then someone stood. Applause erupted. Officers from all divisions, detectives, dispatchers, even the chief, filled the space with cheers and clapping. No one said a word for a long time. They just watched the German shepherd who had taken a bullet, died nearly twice, and now stood beside his handler again. Later that week, during the Friday morning flag ceremony, the entire unit gathered outside the precinct. Mark and Axel stood in front of the flagpole, just as they had countless times before. But this time was different. Axel sat beside Mark, head held high despite the visible limp. His fur had regrown, and his badge tag gleamed in the sun. The American flag rose slowly above them, the wind catching its edge. Silence fell over the gathering. Then, one by one, officers began to stand straighter. Hands moved to hearts. Some wiped away tears they tried to hide behind sunglasses. In that moment, Axel was more than a canine officer. He was a symbol of resilience, of loyalty beyond words, of love so fierce it defied bullets and broken bones. A warrior had returned, not the same as before, but somehow stronger than ever. The day had started like any other. A follow-up on a routine investigation led Officer Mark Davis to an old abandoned warehouse on the industrial edge of town. The building had been flagged in a previous drug case, and Mark was tasked with a solo walkthrough, checking for recent activity. It was supposed to be quick. In and out, nothing risky. He parked the patrol car out front, radioed in his location, and stepped inside. The place smelled of mildew and rust, the air still and thick with dust. He swept the rooms methodically, flashlight in hand, eyes alert. He had nearly completed his search when it happened. A sudden, violent spark from a corroded electrical panel, followed by a boom that rocked the building. In seconds, thick smoke filled the hallway. Flames erupted from a side room and began to spread rapidly through the dry walls and broken ceiling tiles. Mark tried to call for help, but the blast had fried the nearby circuitry. His radio sputtered and died. The smoke was choking. Disoriented and coughing, he dropped to the floor and tried to crawl toward the entrance, but flames were already closing in. His chest burned, his lungs screamed, and then everything started to fade. Back at the station, something was wrong. Axel, usually calm and content to rest near Mark's desk, was pacing wildly. He barked at the empty patrol car, circled it over and over, then ran to the building entrance, barking louder, more frantic with each pass. Officers nearby noticed. "He is acting weird," one of them said. "Where is Mark?" Another officer pulled up the patrol unit's GPS. "Wait, he checked into that warehouse 2 hours ago. He never signed back out." A cold silence swept the room. They opened the door. Axel bolted through it like a shot. A convoy of officers followed Axel as he sprinted across town, taking back alleys and side roads as if his instincts alone guided him. He reached the warehouse just as thick smoke began billowing from the broken windows. Without hesitation, Axel ran straight into the burning building. "Get that dog back!" someone shouted, but no one moved fast enough. Inside, through the haze of smoke and sparks, Axel found Mark slumped against a fallen beam, eyes closed, barely conscious. Flames crept dangerously close. Axel lunged forward, grabbed the sleeve of Mark's uniform with his teeth, and began pulling, slowly, painfully but determined, inch by inch, foot by foot. Axel dragged him through the debris and toward the entrance. The team burst in moments later with gear and extinguishers. They found Axel straining to pull Mark past the threshold, his body singed, eyes red from the smoke, but his grip unrelenting. Together they pulled both of them out. Paramedics worked fast. Mark was alive, dazed, but stable. Axel lay beside him, panting heavily, his chest rising and falling with labored effort. No one spoke. They just stared in awe at the battered shepherd, who had once again thrown himself into danger for the man he loved. Mark opened his eyes and saw Axel beside him. With a rasping voice, he managed one word. "You came." Axel pressed his head gently against Mark's chest. No bark, no sound, just presence, just loyalty, just love. Mark returned to the station 2 days later, still bandaged and sore, but alive. Axel came with him, walking a little slower than usual, his fur still singed at the edges, but his eyes as alert as ever. The moment they stepped through the front doors, the building erupted into applause. Officers lined the halls, clapping, some with tears in their eyes. No words were needed. Everybody already knew what Axel had done. A week later, at the department's annual memorial and award ceremony, Mark and Axel stood side by side in dress uniform. The chief took the podium, his voice steady but full of emotion as he recounted the events. The bullet Axel took, the fire he ran into, the life he saved not once but twice. For extraordinary bravery in the line of duty, the chief said, "We present the K9 Valor Medal to Officer Axel." The medal, engraved with a silver paw print, was gently fastened to Axel's vest as the crowd rose to its feet. Mark knelt beside him, whispering something only Axel could hear. The applause went on for minutes. After the ceremony, the department announced Axel's retirement. He had earned it 100 times over. There would be no more raids, no more night shifts, but there would be a home, a real one. Mark filled out the paperwork that same afternoon and took Axel home, not just as his partner, but as his family. For the first time, Axel had a bed that was not temporary, a name tag that read family instead of unit, a backyard, a fireplace, and peace. A year later, Mark became a father. When he brought his baby daughter Mia home from the hospital, Axel sniffed her gently, then lay at her crib without needing a word. As she grew, she gave him a name all her own, Soldier Doggy. She never knew him as a canine officer. To her, he was the gentle giant who walked beside her on wobbly legs, who let her nap against his side, who watched her with patient, silent love. The years passed. Axel grew slower. His muzzle turned gray. He stopped chasing squirrels, but never stopped watching over the family he had earned. One golden afternoon, the sun spilled across the backyard, warm and soft. Mia, now 5, ran barefoot through the grass, her laughter echoing across the fence line. Axel lay nearby, stretched beneath the old oak tree, his head resting on his paws, his eyes following her every move. Mark stood on the porch, arms crossed, a quiet smile on his face. This was peace. This was home. And as the wind stirred the leaves and the sky blushed into dusk, Axel closed his eyes, not because he was tired, but because he was content. Some heroes wear badges, some wear fur, but all of them leave paw prints on our hearts. Thank you for joining us on this unforgettable journey of courage, loyalty, and unbreakable bonds. Axel's story reminds us that heroes do not always walk on 2 legs. Sometimes they come with wagging tails and hearts far bigger than we can imagine. If this story touched your heart, there are many more incredible tales waiting to be told. Subscribe to Amazing Paws Stories for more real-life stories of bravery, second chances, and the extraordinary ways animals change our lives. Don't forget to like, share, and leave a comment. Tell us which moment in Axel's journey moved you the most. Because here at Amazing Paws Stories, every paw print leads to a story worth remembering. See you in the next one.